also have another name, and that name is not a lawyer. So I'm about to talk about some legal things, but I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. Okay, so imagine that you are doing some research. You really want to find something really, really good. Maybe you're a student and your professor has said, get some peer-reviewed articles. Maybe you're a researcher yourself. But for whatever reason, you really want to have the best information possible. So you're out there, you're on Google, maybe you're using ChatGPT or another large language model. You're going along. Okay, you're going along. Can you hear me? Great. So you're going along and you find the perfect article. You read the title, you look at the abstract, and you're just like, wow, this is absolutely perfect. But then, bam, you hit a paywall. All of a sudden, they're like, that's going to be $35 for 24-hour access. So probably what you do, maybe you give up. Maybe you try to find a pirated copy. You know, it happens. Maybe you see if you're a library, because even a public library may be able to get it through interlibrary loan. Maybe you're just like, yeah, I'll just use the abstract and kind of hope no one notices, right? So that also happens. So what is happening here? What's happening is that you have met the intersection of copyright and the economics of scholarly publishing. And what this does is it interferes with your First Amendment right to information, and it also interferes with our ability to create new things. Okay, so copyright. Copyright is in the US Constitution. Who knew that? It's in the Constitution, yay, some people knew that. Its goal is to promote creativity, the progress of science and the useful arts, as they put it. So it gives a monopoly for a time to creators on their work. It focuses on creative expression. So not things like ideas, concepts, processes, procedures, discoveries. Here's an example. So a recipe cannot be copyrighted. A recipe is a list of ingredients and some procedures. If you write a cookbook or publish your recipe, what is copyrightable is the writing about the recipe. So where you talk about why certain procedures are going to give you a delicious dish, or your memories of cooking the dish with your family, or how it's important to your culture, that's the part that's copyrightable. Copyright is instant. The minute you create something and it's fixed in a tangible form, it is protected by copyright. No need to publish, no need to register. So me talking now is protected by copyright because it's being recorded. If I was just talking, it would not be protected. Also, you wouldn't even know what I was saying, right? Okay, so copyright lasts for a really long time. When it was put in the Constitution, the copyright term was 14 years. It is now 70 years after the death of the author, or for corporate or anonymous works, 95 years. So the monopoly rights include reproduction and distribution, kind of the publishing side of it. So this, bam, paywalled article, probably the researchers still own the copyright, but they've assigned some of their rights to the publisher, so their work gets published. So specifically reproduction and distribution. This is parallel to musical artists who enter into agreements with record labels, right? So that their work can be seen by a wide audience, so they have that publishing. And of course, that always goes well, right? There are no examples you can think of recording artists and their labels getting into conflicts, right? Well, anyway. So yeah, Prince, when he was the artist formerly known as Prince and was represented by a symbol, that was basically a copyright dispute. And so similarly to artists who want a good record label, people who are publishing their research usually want to be published in the best publication they can be. However, there is a huge difference, which is that in general, the authors are not paid by the publisher. So if for some reason you pay the $35, none of that money goes to the people who did the article. Does that make sense? Yeah. So who does pay them? Usually it's part of their job. For example, if you work at a university and research is part of your job expectations, you may have grant funding, either from the government or someone else, or you may just be doing it on your own time. For example, a medical professional who's in private practice and wants to share some discovery from their practice is going to be doing the work of research and writing on their own time. The publishing, doing research is often a requirement for our jobs, for our success, or we do it to increase our reputation. So not only does the publisher not pay the author, often the same organizations that essentially funded the actual research need to pay again for access to the articles. So university libraries subscribe to databases and journals. Sometimes businesses do the same. Sometimes we pay the publisher again because if we as researchers want our research to be more widely available, to be published open access under a Creative Commons license, we'll have to pay a fee to the publisher in order to have that increased exposure, which usually does lead to more citations, which we like. When universities and other institutions pay for access to the articles, we're also paying for temporary access. So if you buy a physical book, you own it, right? You can resell it, you can give it to your friends, whatever. Electronic access, there's usually electronic licensing terms on top of the copyright, which means that we basically have temporary access and we have to pay every year, just like that 24-hour, $35 access for the article. We also pay with our data. Many of the database and scholarly publishing companies are owned by very large data analytics companies. And when we're accessing those materials behind a login, we are being tracked. So what about the First Amendment? What about the other side of this, the access? So there is an acknowledged tension between copyright and the First Amendment. We usually think of the First Amendment as freedom to speak. But in order to speak, we need information. So it includes an implicit right to information. And you do see this in lawsuits, for example, about book bans. A judge may hold that students are being deprived of their First Amendment rights if books are removed from their school library. Yeah, so the expense of accessing scholarly information also limits the voices, again, that right to information, because only people with access through wealthy institutions can get the information they need to create their own information. As a researcher, you need to know what research has been done. You need to be able to look at the information contained in research articles, but you may not be able to pay to get access to those articles. And that, that hurts us all because it limits the voices that are heard. So copyright does have some exceptions that kind of balance or attempt to balance the restriction of rights, which of course, the goal is to encourage creation, right? So you encourage creation because authors can be paid for their work. But then again, that also paradoxically has that limitation that conflicts with the First Amendment because other people cannot use that information to create their own work. So copyright does expire eventually. Works go into the public domain. Government works, US government works are always in the public domain. It's the logic that we've already paid for them. More recently, research funded by the federal government is supposed to be made available immediately to the public. People can also choose to put their own work into the public domain using a CC0, it's not quite a license, but a CC0 tool. And if you are enjoying this relaxing vista behind me, user Aaron D. Cruz released this photograph under a CC0 license, a no rights reserved license in Wikimedia Commons. So that's all available for us. And just a reminder, as you travel around the internet, when you find things that are available for free, they aren't behind an obvious paywall, that doesn't mean they're in the public domain. Remember, copyright is instant. Pretty much everything you see is under copyright. So assume it's under copyright unless it says it isn't, right? Another exception that's very, very important is called fair use. This is how we use a lot of things in academia. It's also how people do things like satires, sort of create new works out of existing works once they have access to them. The fair use looks at 4 factors: the nature of the work, the purpose of the use, the amount of the work that's used, and if there's conflict with the author's market for their work. Of course, in order to do all those things, you need access to it first, right? So one of the things that I've been thinking about is that when we want to use, specifically in the scholarly context, research articles, we don't actually want the creative expression part of it. We really want the things that are more like the recipe. We want the ideas, the concepts, the discoveries, the processes. We really want the information, not the exact words that the authors used to describe their discoveries. So, and again, this cuts off activity, not just for those of us who can get, maybe get access, to those of us here in North America and Europe, but worldwide. Another limitation is that a lot of our experiences of these articles come through some sort of algorithmic intermediary. So if we're using Google or OpenAI or another LLM, that the algorithms will give us the materials that are the most popular, or that they, based on personalized searching, think we're most likely to want to see, not really the full range of what's out there. But we always kind of assume that we are seeing the full range of what's out there. Okay, and so this is the other alternative, and I've mentioned it already, is open access. Creative Commons licenses give an opportunity for authors to, working within copyright law, pre-authorize use of their work. And especially those of us who are never going to be making money off it anyway, we might as well, make it available for others. So it works within copyright. It's international. Copyright law is pretty harmonized internationally. And it's based on a very solid legal basis. There's a lawyer-friendly layer of it, there's a human-friendly layer of it, and there's a machine-readable layer of it. So it allows you to pre-license your works. It always requires attribution, that you be given credit, because we all want credit. But then you can also choose to place other restrictions on your work if you want to. But that allows people, depending again on the specific permissions that you provide, to retain, right? To hold on to it, not just temporarily, but to hold it for a while, to reuse it, to make revisions. Like if you have something that you'd like to use, but it just needs like a different example, or maybe you found some typos or whatever, to remix, to combine multiple works into one new one, and then to redistribute those materials. And a lot of times finding this stuff still gets mediated by algorithms, but it's a little more open. So I'm gonna leave you with some things to do. So first of all, shift your thinking. We have a right to information. I think a lot of time we get feel kind of hopeless or cynical. We get kind of passive around information, but we have a right to it. It's in the First Amendment. Think about the health of the overall sort of activity of creation and how you can contribute to that. Release under open licenses if you can. And also look at your privacy settings. See what you can do to have a less mediated experience of the information that's available. So just move yourself to having agency, whatever form that agency takes. And thank you.